I've never been much of a puzzle gamer. Sure, I enjoy games like Portal or Fez, but in this case, I'm more so talking about games with numbers, grids, and whatnot to them. And yeah, I'll play the occasional Wordle like everybody else, but generally, I'm more so of a fan of games that have some form of action to them. Every once in a while, though, I'll wind up playing a game in a genre that I'm not typically a fan of, and I'll actually wind up surprising myself. And okay, yeah, I wouldn't be talking about this right now if it weren't relevant, so let me just get straight to the point. Lately, I've been hooked on Mario's Picross. I've been finding myself reaching for this game a lot whenever I have any form of downtime lately. Sitting around waiting for something to install? Picross. Relaxing in bed before getting some sleep? Picross. Sitting on the toilet? Picross. I'm just kidding about that last one. I don't actually do that. But you get the point. This game is weirdly compelling. Now, to preface this, I wouldn't say that this is my first time playing a game in this series. I've solved my fair share of these puzzles in the past, and I've actually owned Picross 3D for quite a while now. That being said, none of the games ever really connected with me until just recently, after I saw a few videos on YouTube about the series and decided to give it another try. And clearly, this time around, it finally clicked. To give a quick rundown, just in case you've never actually played these games before, Picross are grid-based puzzles that originated from Japan in the late 1980s. Technically, they're actually called nonograms, but for the sake of this video and consistency, I'm just going to be using Picross as a broad term from now on. Back in 1995, Nintendo must have caught wind of this fairly new puzzling craze, because that's when they released their very first title in what would wind up becoming a surprisingly long-running series. That game was Mario's Picross for the original Game Boy. The goal of Picross is somewhat simple. You're presented with an empty grid, and numbers are provided to you next to each row and column. These numbers represent how many squares need to be filled in within each adjacent line of boxes, and it's up to you to figure out which squares are the correct ones. If there's only one number, you'll only want to fill in one group of squares within a line, but if there are multiple numbers next to each other, that means you'll shade in multiple sets of squares within that line. But there must be a gap in between each set. Using both axes of the grid, you'll slowly start to figure out which boxes go where while crossing out any squares that don't fit, and eventually, you'll solve the puzzle. And while this is a broad explanation for how the puzzles work in general, this is also exactly how Mario's Picross plays, albeit with a D-pad and some buttons instead of a pencil and paper. I actually think the video game format works a bit better for a game like this because of how much more portable it is. I mean, imagine trying to take over 200 printed puzzles with you somewhere. You'd either need a pretty thick book, or whatever that was. Yeah, I think I'll stick with the cartridge. Of course, this is a video game, and as such, there are a few differences than if you were to play a traditional puzzle. The biggest one being the time limit. You'll start out with a whole half hour to solve each puzzle, and while that may seem like a lot of time, you'll find that it can dwindle down much faster than you'd think. Any mistake you make will cost you 2 minutes on the timer, so if you mess up too much, it's game over, and you'll have to start the puzzle all over again. If that sounds too daunting, you're also given a hint option at the start of each puzzle, which reveals a certain amount of squares for you to then work off of, though I usually just skip this option because I enjoy the challenge. Once you clear enough puzzles in the game, you'll also unlock a time trial mode. I haven't personally gotten to that point yet in this game, but I have played the same mode in Mario's Super Picross, so I'll give you the quick rundown. In time trial mode, the timer counts up instead of down, so right off the bat it's a bit more relaxed of an experience. That being said, your mistakes aren't shown to you this time around, so it's entirely up to you to figure out where each square goes. Time trial mode is more akin to a traditional paper and pencil nonogram experience, and depending on your skill level, you'll find that it's either easier or harder than the game's main mode. And that pretty much covers the gameplay, so now let's talk about style. The aesthetics of Mario's Picross are really fun. The whole thing is themed after archaeology, and as such, you'll be using a hammer and chisel to chip away at each puzzle until you're done solving. Once solved, puzzles make up a little picture, and seeing your work start to come together as you carve away is a pretty satisfying feeling. Most of the time. Sometimes there are puzzles that just look kind of confusing, and it's not really obvious what they're supposed to be until the game flat out tells you. Obviously, it's not a big deal because most of the fun comes from actually solving the puzzle, but it's just weird sometimes. I mean, come on, how is that bread? Why is that bread? Come on, Nintendo. What are you doing here? As for the content of the game, I'd say that there's a good amount of it. Mario's Picross has 4 different sets of puzzles for you to choose from. Easy Picross, Kanoko, Star, and as we established earlier, Time Trial Mode. The Easy category contains puzzles with grids of 5x5, 10x10, and 15x15 squares in order to help you get into the swing of things. But once you get to the 2 main categories, you'll be solving 15x15 puzzles exclusively. Each category contains 64 different puzzles, which brings the final total to a whopping 256. For a game so portable and so simple, that's a lot of content. I've been playing the game for just a few days now at this point, and at the time of writing the script, I'm only just about halfway through the Kanoko puzzles. As I mentioned before, this is also a game I only really play when I've got a little bit of free time. I'm not binging Picross like a maniac, so I think I'll be playing this one for a good while until I'm done. So yeah, that's Mario's Picross. As you can tell, the concept is pretty simplistic, and I think that's exactly what makes it just so captivating. Whereas something like a crossword puzzle can feel next to impossible to solve sometimes without looking the answer up due to a simple gap in your knowledge, Picross never really has this problem. Instead, if you're stuck, you most likely just filled in the wrong square somewhere. And all you have to do is recheck your work, fix any potential mistakes, and continue solving away. I honestly wasn't expecting to like this game as much as I do, and for a game so simple, I've been having a ton of fun with it. It's a great time killer when you want something to play for only a few minutes, and hey, it's a puzzle game too, so it's probably good for your brain. Just don't quote me on that. Unfortunately, copies of Mario's Picross are kind of pricey right now for some reason, but I mean, hey, if you're really crazy about Picross, maybe $50 is worth it to you. Now, would I recommend it at that price point? No, not really, but ultimately that decision is up to you. Luckily, if you have a Nintendo Switch, the game is also available on Nintendo Switch Online, so at least it's still somewhat easily accessible to play nowadays. All in all though, this is a great little gem of a puzzle game, and one that really surprised me. If you're the type of person who likes puzzles, logic, or just wants a fun little game to play while you've got some extra time to kill, I'd definitely recommend giving this game a shot. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to go finish filling in this puzzle. And I think that's exactly what makes it... I did it again. I'm not Golem. I'm not Golem. I don't want the Ring of Power. Oh my god.